Hey guys, Justin here. I wanted to take a quick second and let you know about Growth Now Movement Live, coming to Reading, Pennsylvania, May 30th to June 1st. This event is going to feature some of my top guests like Fabio Viviani from America's Top Chef, best-selling author and future board expert Sarah Centrella, Albie Manzo from Real Housewives of New Jersey, and many, many more. This is going to be a game-changing event. It is truly going to be a day-long rock concert for entrepreneurs, forward thinkers, and people who are ready to take their life to the next level. So if that's you, head over to gnmlive.com and grab your tickets today because prices are going up soon. Again, go to gnmlive.com now to level up your life and truly create the life of your dreams. Can't wait to see you there. What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now Movement. This week, I sit down with retired Navy SEAL, Lieutenant Jason Redman. On September 13th, 2007, while acting as Assault Force Commander on an operation to capture an Al-Qaeda high-value individual, Lieutenant Redman's assault team came under heavy machine gun and small arms fire, and he, along with two other teammates, were wounded in the ensuing firefight. Despite being shot twice in the arm, blowing his elbow wide open, and once in the face, as well as multiple rounds to his helmet, night vision goggles, body armor, and weapon, Jason and his team fought valiantly, winning the fight, ensuring everyone came home alive. In this episode, we talk about Jason's unique and inspiring journey of overcoming so many adversities, from having to overcome his own arrogance all the way to having to face and overcome 30-plus reconstructive surgeries to become the inspiring leader he is today. Not only will you learn about true leadership in this episode, you will also be inspired to stand up against any hardships you are currently facing and take them on face to face. Now, without further ado, let's get into the episode with Lieutenant Jason Redman. Hey guys, really quick before we get to the actual episode, I wanted to quickly tell you about one of the incredible partners for Growth Now Movement Live. It's a company called Penji. Penji is incredible. It gives you all the benefits of an in-house designer with none of the hassle from outsourcing. They handle all the unlimited graphic design support, dedicated project manager, and under 48-hour delivery time. They've handled all the great stuff that you've been seeing out there on my social media for Growth Now Movement Live, and they do some incredible work. They're pretty much able to build out websites for you. They're able to build out apps for you, any kind of flyers, graphic design that you need for social media, and you get all of that for one flat monthly rate. You can get started today at penji.co. That is penji.co. And what you guys want to do is head over there, sign up, and use the code PODCAST15 to get 15% off your first month with them. Again, it is one flat rate for unlimited graphic design. It is an absolutely incredible team over there. I highly recommend it. Head over to penji.co, use that code PODCAST15, and sign up today. Okay, now let's get to that interview. Jason, welcome to the Growth Now Movement, man.
Justin, thanks for having me on, brother. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited because, my brother-in-law reached out to me and he goes, bro, you have to listen to this Jocko episode and then you have to get this guy on the show. And so I watched the episode because I watched Jocko on YouTube. I'm just enthralled by his mannerism. And I watched the interview and I was like, oh my gosh. The things that you've been through, the things that you've overcome, it's mind blowing. And it really kind of fits what my show's all about, which is over growth. It's about, taking those adversities and creating the best life that to people who don't know who you are. Why don't you just take a couple of minutes, just introduce yourself to my audience as who you are today, and we'll unpack how you got.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am, I sometimes feel like I'm a little bit of an enigma. So I am a 21-year retired Navy SEAL. There's a lot of SEAL speakers out there. I am a little unique because I am a SEAL leader who actually stumbled pretty hard and failed at one point in my career. And oftentimes that's a kiss of death in a special operations community. It's pretty hard to recover from that. But I did recovered in a exemplary way. Went on to success in the SEAL teams and then found myself in a fierce Al-Qaeda ambush in Iraq in 2007, and I got all shot up, which it was right about the time I was really excelling and accelerating in my career. And all of a sudden, all this momentum came to a grinding halt as I faced the prospect of 4 years of surgeries and being put back together. And then where do I go from here? Because over that process, came to find out that my operational career was over due to my injuries. Finished my time in the military, wrote a memoir, The Trident, about my leadership journey of failure and redemption and severe injury and the overcome mindset. And that went on, thankfully, to be a New York Times best-selling book. And now I am out there speaking on leadership and teamwork and really the overcome mindset. And one of my big things I speak on is the Pentagon of Peak Performance, how we lead ourselves and how we navigate the life ambushes that everybody encounters. And the last thing, I am a huge proponent and advocate for Wounded Warriors. I ran my own organization for almost 10 years, and we phased that down in 2018. But I continue to support Wounded Warriors and how critical it is to take care of those guys, specifically with the physiological and then the psychological wounds of war.
Yeah, man. And, you say that so systematically, but there's so much to it. And, I was extremely intrigued by the story of you kind of getting in your own, I think, for lack of a better word, arrogance was what came to mind as far as like, I'm good enough. I'm strong enough. I can do this. No offense. I think I would feel the same way if I was able to ever become a Navy SEAL. Like that's the ultimate, right? What was that process like, as far as, the journeying through yourself? Because I think sometimes that's our biggest battle. It's like, how do we, number one, get over ourselves? And number two, how do we then make that, a great accomplishment? So why don't you go into that story a little bit as far as like how arrogance got in your way as a leader?
I think arrogance gets in the way for a lot of people who excel in, different career paths. I see it a lot in career paths where you get a lot of notoriety, or career paths where it's a very high level Olympic athletes. I see it in professional athletes, and I see it sometimes in business if you have individuals that really accelerate to success quickly. I did it in the SEAL teams, and the SEAL teams obviously a very elite organization, and I excelled at a young age. I was very young when I came in. I was only 19 when I graduated SEAL training.
Wow.
And grew up in this brotherhood of warriors and did well. Worked my way up until I got recommended for a commission, got a commission, came back as an officer. And it was at this point that I kind of reached this crossroads where I thought I knew a lot, if not everything, unfortunately. Yeah. And I quickly found out that that's just not the case. Not only was it not the case, was it misguided. It is definitely not the way to lead. I truly believe in servant selfless leadership, trying to put your people and the organization and the mission first. And if you do that, you naturally will fall into place. So I wasn't doing any of that when I came back as a new officer. And a lot of things happened. It was kind of the perfect storm. I went to school right as 9/11 happened. So I was actually going to school, getting my degree so I could come back into the Navy and the SEAL teams with my degree, for my commission. But during that time, the SEAL teams went to war and all of our tactics and techniques changed. We quickly realized that all the things we had been doing in the past didn't work very well in the rough urban terrain of Iraq and desert terrains of Iraq, and it didn't work in the rural, mountainous regions of Afghanistan. We were still operating off a lot of the old Vietnam tactics. So we had to change everything we were doing. And all that happened while I was at school. So suddenly, I leave not necessarily the military. I was still in the military, but I leave the SEAL teams and go to school, get my degree, come back thinking I'm the man, because now not only have I, been in for 11 years at this point, but, I've got a degree and I'm ready to set the world on fire.
Yeah.
Everything had changed. I went from a peacetime military with very few individuals in the SEAL teams having combat experience to stepping back into leading the vast majority of our guys who had combat experience. And oh, by the way, all the tactics had changed.
That's
and
crazy.
This is where arrogance really got me, because where a good leader is secure enough in himself or herself to be able to say, you know what, I don't know how to do that. And that's okay. Leaders don't have to know everything. That's why you lead. You build amazing teams of people who know what they're doing, and you trust them to do it. And if you could appreciate to ask them and be humble enough to ask them, hey, can you show me how to do this so I have a better understanding of how this is done? I get it. I'm never going to be as good as you are because this is your primary job. But I wasn't doing that. Mm-hmm. Instead, arrogance really got the best of me, and I was falling behind because I was trying to learn. I was drinking from the fire hose, trying to learn all these new tactics, and trying to be a leader. And instead of managing those things well, I wasn't doing it. And that really kind of started this downward decline, where I was hanging on so tight and it was just kind of damaging my credibility. I started doing a lot of things that many of us as humans do when we're struggling with stress and we're falling behind. I started self-medicating with too much alcohol, additionally damaging my credibility as a leader. Yeah. And all of that came to a head with a bad call on a mission in Afghanistan. Thankfully, nobody was lost, but it kind of brought everything onto a point of focus for my leadership and my teammates. And they basically said, hey, this guy's dangerous. He's making bad calls. We don't want him as a leader. We may not even want him as a SEAL. And that is that was the biggest blow I'd ever had in my life. In our community, it's so hard to earn the Trident, to become a SEAL, and even harder to become, obviously, a SEAL leader and an officer. So to have both of those things pulled out from underneath me and to be told, hey, man, you're found lacking. And many of us don't. Not only do we not want to follow you, we don't want to work with you.
Yeah,
that was probably the biggest blow of my life.
What was the decision that you made? That, like, obviously there you were in Afghanistan. Why did you think that was the right call versus them saying it wasn't?
So we were conducting a mission where I was in charge of a team of guys on what we call an overwatch operation. We had guys that were moving through the valley, flushing the enemy out and basically patrolling to contact the enemy. We were in overwatch, holding high ground to be able to fire down on enemy possessions to, provide security for the guys that were pushing through the valley. Sure. At one point during the day, the guys in the valley got into a huge firefight, and I was my team was the closest ones forward, myself and a machine gunner at this point. And I made the decision to go down into the valley to support them. Now, a lot of people that don't understand tactics and have never been in combat are thinking, well, what's wrong with that? That's what warriors are supposed to do. Yes and no. Because you would need to really read the Trident to kind of understand all the backgrounds. I mean, it would take a lot more time than what we have right now. But the bottom line is it wasn't a good call for a multitude of reasons. One, probably the biggest reason why it wasn't a good call is it was driven by my own self-interest. I wanted to get in the fight. I saw a shortcut to, hey, I'm going to look like a great leader by rushing down into this valley and coming in to save the day for our guys.
Yeah, it was to serve myself.
It was. And not only that, I didn't have all the information. I didn't take the time to allow the battlefield to develop, which is something we talk about, something I write about in my next book. And because of that, it actually put myself, my machine gunner I took with me, and the other guys down in the valley in more jeopardy than they already were. So it was a bad call. Now, here's where the difference is. People make bad calls all the time. Even in combat, we make mistakes. And if after the fact they had pulled me aside and said, hey, that was stupid and this is why, and I had said, you know what, you're right, that was a bad call, but I didn't. I fought against it. And this is where arrogance continued. Instead of owning it and just said, you're right, that was a bad call, I did that for my own reasons and I should have thought that through, but I didn't. I fought back and I said, hey, I made the right call. I did the right thing. I ran to the sound of the guns. I went to support my brothers, and no matter what they could tell me, I was in denial.
Yeah. And obviously all of our actions have a greater or reaction. And so in that moment, that's when the rug was pulled out from under you. And obviously there was a punishment. We'll get into that a little bit, but I want to go into just the mindset need to, number one, sign up for to potentially sacrifice yourself for this, to do all these amazing things you did and then do it on the highest level. Where did that come? Was that almost like the arrogance that led into when you became a leader because you're like, I can do this. I can put the country on my shoulders, or what was the mindset there when you first?
No, I had come from a military family, so I think it came from two different sides. One side was patriotism. I grew up, I grew up in a family of military members. My dad had been military. My grandfather, a highly decorated World War II pilot. My uncle lost his life in the Pacific in World War II. So I always wanted to be in the military from a very young age. So that was one part. The second part was a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I was a small guy. I'm not a great big guy. I'm about 5'8", 170. And back then when I was in high school, I literally was the 95-pound weakling. And I got bullied, I got picked on, but I just had this inner fire and rage that lived inside me. And if you told me I couldn't do something, all I wanted to do was prove you wrong. So, one day my dad told me about the SEAL teams when I was about 14, and I said, that's what I want to do. And of course, I told friends, and my friends laughed at me and heckled me. I mean, I went in the recruiting station and they laughed and heckled me. And all it did was just burn my fire even greater, to prove people wrong. So that really drove me. And the other thing, I wanted to be a part of this elite fighting force. I mean, the SEAL teams, there wasn't a whole lot of information about them back in the late 80s, early 90s. This was before Charlie Sheen, made his debut as a Navy SEAL. And there were very few books. The SEALs were a very secretive organization back then. And that appealed to me. I just said, man, I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. They say this is the toughest training in the entire world. I want that. I want to prove to people that I can do this.
Yeah, and see, that's why your whole entire story is so impressive, because most people, when they get slapped down like that, you can't do it. They kind of bend it. They go, you're right. You're probably right. I am too small. I am this, and then that takes us to when that rug was pulled out from under you and, they sent you to Army Ranger training and they pulled everything from you. Most people would be like, oh, I guess I don't deserve that. But you fought through that. Let's talk a little bit more about that as well. That whole, no, I can do this again type.
Yeah. And it is both. It is a very double-edged sword, that mentality. So, I'm 44, getting ready to hit 45. And as I get older, I used to, it didn't matter what people told me. I used to joke about the fact that, there's the easy way to do things. There's a hard way to do things. And then there was my way to do things, which was, as grueling and ridiculously hard as possible. I mean, and oftentimes it was because someone would give me advice, and instead of heeding it, I would say, well, I'll figure this out on my own. So as I get older, I'm trying to get a little smarter and listen to people that have been there before, and not say, Jay Redman, you are not the most uniquely qualified individual on the planet that just happens to figure this out when thousands of other people haven't. Because maybe you can, but the reality is you're just putting yourself in for a lot of pain. So I think now, as I'm older, I look at realistic expectations. Where am I? Is this truly where I need to go? And what makes these 1,000 other people, I read, I look at videos, what makes them or me any better than any of them? So I think that's one key thing that we have to talk about. But where it is, the positive side is oftentimes in life, it's just because there's adversity in our path or something is hard that makes us not want to go through it. And that's where definitely this fire has always enabled me to be able to grind through the adversity. No matter what I feel, I'm just going to continue to put one foot in front of the other. Sure. And I think that's key. That is I talk about the overcome mindset. That is the essence of the overcome mindset. It's continuing to grind through, even though every day, on some days you may only make a centimeter of progress, but it's still progress. Even though everything is pushing against you. And that's kind of where I was at when I got to Ranger School. We come full circle back to this moment where teammates didn't want to work with me. My leadership basically said, "Hey, you got one shot to fix yourself. And, if you don't, we're going to kick you out." And I'll be honest, I was really starting to doubt myself. The hole was so deep that I was at the bottom of, looking up, that I couldn't even see a speck of light.
Wow.
And I was like, how am I going to earn back the trust of my guys? I have absolutely destroyed my tactical and professional, my operational reputation. I'm here in Ranger School. And I've got to shine. And I didn't have the right mindset at that time. I'll be honest. I was mentally broken.
Yeah.
And, I had hit rock bottom, and, I was real bitter about being there. I was just kind of going through the motions. And, I basically, for the only time in my life, I quit. And I quit because things had gone wrong. All of my own doing, and the Ranger instructor started heckling me because I failed a land navigation course. And in that moment of mental weakness, I allowed myself mentally to get to this point where I was at the breaking point, and I snapped, and I said, okay, I'm out of here. And a lot of it had to do with that little voice inside your head that tells you can't do this. Well, that voice that I'd fought against my entire life, I finally gave in and listened to him. And he was wrong. And I was fortunate enough that I had some leadership that stepped in, a very key leader that by sheer happenstance, the Ranger Colonel, when I was checking out, happened to know. And he, slapped me in the face with the reality bat and basically said, do you want to live your life this way? Do you want to go forth with your life knowing that you quit and you ended your career on this note? And he, in that moment, gave me the most succinct and sound leadership advice I've ever been given. And it was because I told him, I said, look, even if I manage to overcome this, the guys are never going to follow me again. And he said to me, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. And I mean, It's so, yeah, powerful.
That's powerful, man. I literally got chills when you said that. Like, that is so powerful. What a statement.
Oh, and for the first time in many months, as I ground through this black hole I was in, I saw light, and I said, you're right. And so I went back through the course, and it was during this time that I finally started to really look inward at myself and look at all the lies and the walls that I had built up, and just said, man, you can do this. And you can do it one step at a time, and it's going to be hard, and you're going to have setbacks, and there are going to be people that don't like you and don't believe in you, and they may never like you or believe in you. But as long as you give people a reason to, there will be some that follow you. And as long as you're focused on leading yourself and setting that example, then that's all you can do at the end of the day. Just look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, did I do everything I could to set the example and lead myself as good as possible?
Yeah,
and that became my focus.
Yeah, show up as your best self in everything. And, hopefully, like you said, hopefully people follow. And, so much of that is a lot of what I try and do this podcast of like, look, like I mess up too, right? But I try and show up in my best self all the time, whether in interviews, whether on a stage, whether it's for my clients, all those things. I show up as my best. And it's not always perfect. I mess up, but there's people that follow me all over the world that follow this podcast, that listen. And it's really kind of mind blowing because I'm like, you almost don't feel deserving of it, but you saying if you just show up as your best self and you give it your all, like that's enough, right? And that's so crazy. And you overcame these odds and you worked your way through Army Ranger School and you got back as a Navy SEAL, right? And then that actually, I don't know if this is necessarily the hardest adversity in your life, but in my opinion, it was the hardest thing you had over, when you were under fire in Afghanistan.
This is. And this is a really important point, Justin. It was unequivocally the hardest thing I've ever been through, hands down to this day. And failure is a really tough thing. It really, failure is much more difficult, in my opinion, than injury. And I am a really unique individual because I've been through some really major life ambushes. I've been through things that most people haven't been. I mean, colossal failure, devastating, life-threatening injury that I had to overcome. But it is failure and the damage to our own reputation and our own image of ourselves that's the hardest thing to overcome, because it really does shatter who you are inside and your belief in who you are. And for some people, they'll never recover from that. They don't know how to put themselves back together. And when they do, Humpty Dumpty doesn't quite look like he used to. But the reality is, and this is really important for people to understand, when you fail or you have some major setback or an injury, whatever it is, you're right. You will never be the same as you once were. But here's the good news. You can actually be better. When you glue all these pieces back together, whether it's through injury or whether through failure or whether through it's a colossal mistake, whatever it is, we glue these pieces back together and you can actually be stronger from it. And you won't be the same. I try and describe it as, imagine, if you will, if it was a 12-inch ruler and you fail or something happens, well, now suddenly it's broken and we pulled a chunk out of that ruler. So now we put it back together and it's only like 11.5 inches. So you're never going to be 12 inches again. It's just how it is. But guess what? You can be the absolute best, most phenomenal version of yourself ever, as long as you're willing to continue to grind it out. And just like you and I talked about, at the end of the day, you say, I gave it my all. I crushed that 11.5 inches today.
That's awesome. I love that. You're 100% right. Like when we go through adversity in life, we never come out the same, right? But it's, hopefully we come out. There's a lot of people who don't,
Yeah.
And so I think that's such a key point. Like I'm definitely not the same person I was 3 years ago due to some adversity, but thank God, because if I didn't have those, I wouldn't be able to be the strong 11.5 I am now, right? So it's definitely, a crazy thing to kind of take, pay attention to. So you talk about those damages of failure, and then you also had bodily injury as well in war. What was that moment like? Like, take us there when you were under fire. Like, I couldn't even imagine. First of all, they wouldn't let me join the army. I broke both as a kid. I wasn't, nobody would let me sign. But I couldn't even imagine from what it's like to be able to have the mind. I can't even put it into words. I have the mindset to be able to put yourself in this. And then here you are. Take us to that day.
So, it was amazing. I mean, I had been through this incredible journey of failure and redemption and earning back the trust of my teammates, and found myself on this 2007 deployment in Iraq with probably the best SEAL team assault troop I had ever worked with. Just guys that I, loved to the core, and doing the highest level of what we ever trained to do. In 2006 and 7 in Iraq, Jocko was in Ramadi in 2006, very intense fighting. I was in Fallujah in the spring of 2007, also very intense fighting. But we were making a difference. I mean, we were taking out very dangerous people who, unfortunately, no amount of rehab on this planet would change their mindset and what they wanted to accomplish. So we were either capturing them or we were sending them on their way. So very successful, and we were close to the end of that deployment. And I was at this point where I was like, man, I really redeemed myself. It's exciting. I'm getting ready to screen to go to the next level of the SEAL teams. And we got a call for a individual we've been tracking all deployment, really dangerous individual, the number one leader for the entire western province of Iraq. And we launched on this mission that night. And to make a long story short, we walked into a very well-executed ambush led by his security team. And my team had split off. I had taken a small group of guys. At this point, we were 6 guys, 5 SEALs and our interpreter, and we walked into this ambush. And 3 out of the 5 of us were hit in this very heavy volume of fire. And I was shot at least 8 times between my body armor and body. I never got my front body armor plate back, so I don't know how many rounds that took, but we know at least 8. So I took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which pretty much effectively destroyed my elbow. I actually thought it got shot off in the firefight. And then I was stitched across the body, rounds off my helmet. I took a round to have my left night vision tube shot off. I was taking rounds off my gun and continued to fire. The only point of cover we had was like this large John Deere tractor tire behind us. My guys fell back to that. I continued to fire, and I turned around and moved back to where they were when I caught a round in the face from behind. It hit me right in front of the ear. It traveled through my face, exited the right side of my nose, took off most of my nose, blew out my right cheekbone. The bullet traveled right under my eye, and it vaporized my orbital floor, blowing that out. My eye dropped into this newfound hole in my face. It broke all the bones above my eye, and it shattered my jaw down to my chin and knocked me out. So my guys saw me get hit about 10 yards in front of them and fall and thought I was dead. They thought I was done. So
I can't even. So do you remember any of this?
I remember everything up until when I was shot in the face. I don't remember that moment. And there are also a couple other things to this day I don't remember in the firefight, but I do remember a lot. As a matter of fact, when I got to the hospital later, I wrote the entire firefight down, what I remembered. And the doctors were like, "Did you ever lose consciousness?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. I never lost consciousness." Yeah, I did. I came to find out later there were long bouts that I was unconscious, that I had drifted in and out of consciousness during the firefight.
I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine. And so when, what is the initial reaction when your elbow shot? Like, I imagine, so you're still clear headed at this point where you're like, "Oh shit." Like, what were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking about the task at hand, to be perfectly honest. I mean, don't get me wrong. I thought, holy shit, I just got my arm shot off is what I thought. But, we train extensively for the worst. And we have trained, we train to try and push through these things, because this really gets deep into a subject that my whole new book is about. And it's about being in an ambush and what you do in an ambush, because the mechanics of an enemy ambush, where it's just overwhelming firepower and they're trying to pin you down and kill you and hold you to a position where hopefully they can finish you off, or at least keep you there long enough to move around and capture or kill you. In order to survive an ambush, you have to fight back, or you have to move. What we call the point of attack is called the X. You have to get off the X. And what I've come to find out is people have life ambushes. So my failure as a leader was a major life ambush. Other people, I talk to them about, at the lower levels, it's like relationship issues. Divorce starts to get to the higher level. From there, it goes to business failure, lawsuits, life-threatening illness, injury, and it just goes up from there. But so many people do the same thing. When they have an ambush happen, they just sit there and feel sorry for themselves. They're overwhelmed. They don't know what to do, nor do they try to figure out what to do for a long period of time. So many people just lay there in that moment, just utterly and devastatingly overwhelmed. The SEAL teams thankfully taught me for many years, this overcome mindset. And they taught me that you have to move. You have to get off the X, or else you're going to die. And your guys are going to die. I was a leader, so my thinking was, oh my God, we're stuck in this moment. And if we don't do something, not only am I going to die, my guys are going to die. Yeah. So my first thought what are my next steps? What can I do? This was a little bit interesting, because I quickly realized there wasn't a whole lot I could do in that moment. I was totally pinned down. I literally had machine gun rounds traveling about 8 inches above me. My guys were about 10 yards behind me, engaging a larger enemy force with bigger guns than what we had in the moment. So I knew that I had to wait. I just had to be patient. I had to wait for them to win the fight. And that's what I focused on. I said, okay, that's the biggest thing I can do right now to help this situation is not bother them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I need to allow them to do what they need to do. And I need to focus on the only thing I have control of right now, which is trying to stay alive and being aware. And that's what I focused on. And it's an interesting thing to be facing your own death, because that's exactly what started to happen. I went through, it was about, the firefight we estimate lasted 35 to 40 minutes from the time I was initially shot to the time we took out the enemy and managed to get out of there on the medevac. So I had a lot of time to think about my life and the things that I had done, the good things that I had done, bad things that I had done that I wish I hadn't done, a lot about my family and how much I would have given more time with them. So I talked to a lot of people in my speaking events about this, about how you live your life and how critical it is to build your teams, your circles of influence, something I call social leadership. Because when the end comes, and it is coming for all of us, those are the things you will think about. Yeah. And that's what I thought about in those moments. And thankfully, my teammates did an amazing job. My team leader managed to move forward under fire. He got a tourniquet on my arm. We ended up calling fire directly in our position from an AC-130 gunship up overhead, the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war. And we survived and we got out of there. And that started a whole new journey.
That's incredible. And I mean, I want to again point out, like, this is a larger force that you were fighting with bigger guns. 3 of you were injured. You still won this mission. Incredible.
Well, and we did. And some of that was totally from mindset. It was, if we had laid there in that moment, and this is one of the key principles I'm teaching, it is the basis of my new book, Overcome, that's coming out. When bad things happen, you have to get off the X. You have to, the faster you get off the X, the quicker you can find success and you can find momentum. The longer you sit on the X, it's like quicksand. The more it will suck you down and the harder it is to get past it. And a firefight is probably the most intense example of this you can ever, put forth. And I pray that nobody listening to this ever is caught in a situation like that, because it sucks. But you may not be having, bullets come at you, but you will be having the bullets of life and the hardships of life. You are walking through the battlefield of life. And when these moments come, you have to get that mindset. So many things played into us being successful. 1 was mindset. 2 was the circle of people I had with me. Phenomenal people that I'd built a tremendous relationship with. I had an amazing team with. The external resources we had, that Air Force AC-130 gunship is one of the most amazing platforms on the planet. So we had that to be able to help us get out of there. In life, these things are similar. How we build the team of people around us, how our mindset. This is all built on something I call the Pentagon at Peak Performance. So how I survived that firefight and how I did so well afterward came down to these 5 key principles that I tell people they need to lead their lives, or they need to apply time of leadership into, so that they can be effective and be ready for the life ambushes and be the most effective version and leader of themselves. So number 1 is physical leadership. How well do you lead yourself physically? When I was wounded, I was absolutely in the best shape of my life. I was training for another level SEAL team, which had a very rigorous physical training test. And I literally was in the best shape of my life. And the doctors told me the amount of blood you lost, it's a miracle you survived.
Wow.
But they said you were in such good shape, your body was able to withstand that shock that would have killed most people. So that's the baseline. Number 2 is mental leadership. How do we prepare ourselves for these super uncomfortable, hard, chaotic moments? And it doesn't mean it's ever going to be easy, but what it means is you're able to withstand that mental shock, this overwhelmingness, and despite the pain and the misery and the discomfort, you're able to at least think through it and say, okay, how do I do this? How do I figure out where to go? Number 3 is emotional leadership. How we manage our emotions. Some people, I mean, we've met them. They just melt down in the worst situations. And you can't do that. You can't do it as a leader. That is probably one of the worst things you can do as a leader, because you will pull everybody down with you. And you can't do it for yourself. So you've got to build that emotional leadership. Number 4, social leadership. How you build that circle of trust, that circle of people around you, so that when these bad things happen, or good things happen, we can launch ourselves even further. And then the last one is spiritual leadership. How do you get outside of yourself where you are not the total focal point? For some people, it's religion. Religion's a strong thing for me. But for others, it doesn't have to be. It's just understanding that there's a much bigger world out there than just you. And you, most likely, 99% of the time, there's somebody out there that's going through the same thing you're going through, or even worse than you're going through, and they've made it through it. So you can too. So by giving back, by having that perspective, by taking the time to think outside yourself, all 5 of those areas will prepare you for that moment. And because I had been through that leadership failure before, the hardest thing I've ever been through, by the time I got to that enemy ambush, I was rock solid in all 5 areas of the Pentagon at Peak Performance. And now I try and tell people this is how you want to live your life. And I've had other issues and ambushes since I left the military. I had a bad business deal that ended up in a lawsuit, and I wasn't solid in all 5 of those areas when that happened. So that is my focus now. I don't always do it perfectly because I'm not perfect, but I know it works that if you allocate the time, and that's what made the difference that night. And it'll make the difference for anybody listening to this show. If you build yourself up in those 5 areas, you will be so much more better prepared for the ambushes that are going to come along. I'll leave this last example of how important it is. Think of it like the legs of a table. So obviously, a two-legged table ain't going to stand. It's going to fall over. So at a minimum, you need to have 3. You know, whether you're good in physical, whether you're good at mental, maybe you're stronger emotionally. I know for me, emotional leadership's my weakest area. I can be hot-headed. I can be impulsive. So that's one I really have to work on. Sure. But if you have 4 legs on a table, now that it's pretty solid, but put a 5th leg on a table. So you look at a pentagon 5-sided table, and if it's weighted really well, it's hard to flip that table over.
Yeah.
So that's what I encourage people to do. And I'm pretty excited the new book really gets deep into the weeds on these things.
That's so huge and 100% true, because you don't always know what. But if you're prepared, meaning you're just strong, like you can't necessarily be prepared for what you walked into in battle. You can't be prepared for a lawsuit in your company. You don't know when those are coming. But if you're on a sturdy plan with those 5 things, you can overcome anything. Like, that's such a great example and a great premise to live by, because that's the things we can
absolutely. That's right. But you know, the funny thing is, though, you can see signs. Oftentimes, so many of us walk into ambushes and we ignored the signs. And that's kind of a whole nother thing. But you are absolutely right. And they're going to come. The average human goes through 5 major life ambushes in their lifetime, and they're just going to come. I mean, it's unfortunate, but you know, the journey of a human being is hard. It's we are marked by struggle. And those struggles are out there, man. Those ambushes are out there. The unexpected is coming. If you are aware and have situational awareness, it's pretty rare that something comes along that you never see any signs. I mean, it could potentially a illness sometimes, or accident, you know, a car accident. Sometimes you may not see coming, obviously, but a lot of other things. I know the lawsuit that I got involved in, there were signs. Sure. There were signs, but we missed them. It's kind of like 9/11. We saw signs before, but it didn't make sense until afterward.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That totally makes sense. But again, like you said, if you build that sturdy base, even if you don't, because I think I hope that most people are good-hearted and they don't expect the worst. Like, you know, when you look at a business thing, right, we might see signs and be like, no, they're a good person or whatever the case. But yeah, you have to be aware for sure. But I mean, so here you are, you should have died, but because you had the sturdy base, you didn't. What was that battle like once you started rehab? And I know you had a ton of surgeries. I don't know how many exactly, 30 plus, right? To reconstruct everything and get back up. I think the craziest part, and this when I tell people about you, and I was like, okay, I got him scheduled, I could talk about it. I was like, dude, the guy, he was told that he would never use his arm again, and you should see his videos of him deadlift. Like, you've done the work, you know what I mean? It's just crazy. But what was that journey like? What was that struggle like? And how long did it take to get back on your feet?
Years. And the journey of a wounded warrior is really hard. And I would imagine the journey of anybody that's gone through, you know, whether it's cancer, whether it's a severe injury. One of the things that makes it really hard for wounded warriors is battlefield injuries are really dirty. So most of us come home with infection problems, and I was no different. So oftentimes it would be 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, because they would do a surgery and then there'd be an infection problem, and then it'd undo everything that they had done. And I went through that process. This is actually the 3rd nose they built me. The first 2 failed. So that's one side. The other side was realistic expectations. I mean, in the beginning, I probably had some unrealistic expectations. I actually thought that my goal was to get back and be operational. And with time, I began to realize that probably was not going to happen. And that took some time. So there was coming to grips with that, you know, my course, I had to adapt my destination. You know, I had to figure out what's my new course. And that's really what started to happen. As I went along, I started setting new paths. You know, I launched our nonprofit. I said, wow, you know, there's power. People are motivated by the things that I've been through. If I can help other people, I want to do that. And this is where I got a little bit off track away from my Pentagon at Peak Performance, which I'll be honest, didn't even exist at that time. I didn't even know what it was. Yeah. It took me years to figure that out. I developed this concept probably about a year and a half ago, but back then I didn't know it. And I got out of the military, and like many of us, I was focused on, I want to build my business and I want to take care of my family, and I'm just glad to be alive. And I had lost a ton of weight. I had gotten down, I was 173 when I got shot, and I was down to about 120 pounds after all the surgeries from being wired shut. I was eating through a stomach tube. So I ate everything. When I finally could eat again, like literally everything. I mean, I was like junk foodosaurus. And I put on bad weight, and I wasn't working out because, now I'm making my way out of the military and this new path. And I reached a point in 2015 where I'd had some things happen where the doctor said, "Hey, man, I got bad news for you, dude." He said, "Your health is terrible right now." He said, you're a ticking time bomb for a heart attack. And this was kind of a big punch in the face. And because high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and heart attacks run in my family. My grandfather, the decorated World War II pilot, survived the war and came home and died of a heart attack only a couple of years after he made it home from the war. So I was like, man, I got to make some major life changes. And this is where now, people trying to understand that have been through some major life ambush, whether it's in business or whether it's a personal one, most of us do exactly what I did. Well, I'm going to go back to being the guy I used to be. And, I'm going to be crushing it in the gym. And I started to go down that path, and I wasn't. It was super frustrating and really demoralizing to get back into the gym and, to have once prided myself on intense physical fitness. And now I struggled to do anything. And part of it was I was just in bad shape. And part of it was I had major limitations. I had a serious disability with my left arm. So I think for some people, there's a natural tendency to say, oh, I can't do this, so I'm just not going to. Yeah. And I think that that's an excuse. There are so many people out there who've had grievous injury who figure out how to do it. And that's what I said I was going to do. I was like, all right, man, you got to get past this. You got to get off the X, and you got to start looking at how you build yourself once again. And it may not be the same, but how do you figure out how to be the best version of who you are right now? And that's how I did it. And I just started to grind it out. And it started with low, very humbling weights. But I said, okay, even if I'm adding a pound here or there, that's progress. And now, it's come full circle to where, I'm doing pretty good. I mean, I'm never going to be that guy that's, deadlifting 600 pounds or anything like that, but that's okay. I will be the best version of Jason Redman.
Yeah. And do you ever still beat yourself up? Do you still ever have those moments?
Oh my God. All the time. Yeah. All the time. I am human. I told you, emotional leadership's my weakest. I have a ferocious little demon that lives inside my head that just attacks me constantly. And I'm fascinated by it. I just don't know why humans are made the way we are. I question sometimes, God, why'd you make us the way we are? Because I've had a ton of successes. People look at me and say, oh my God, you're so successful. But I'll have days where I'm just like, you suck. You couldn't do this, or you didn't do this, or you didn't get that done. Who the hell are you being out there trying to teach people to do things? You didn't get this done. And it's such a microscopic thing in the big scheme of things. But we all have this natural tendency. I say that we all live in our own personal hell. So you just got to get out of it.
It's true. Like, I try my best because I beat myself up all the time, but I try my best to celebrate even the small wins, because then it makes the beating yourself up over, it makes it seem obsolete at certain. I'm not always the best at it. I beat myself. That's just the journey, right? When you have goals and you're trying to achieve certain things, like you're like, why can't I get that figured out? Like whatever it can be. So obviously, like you had mentioned, a lot of people look at you have all this success, and you have been successful in every single. You've adapted, you've overcome. So my question for you is, what's your definition, and what are 3 things you do every?
So my definition of success is happiness. And don't get me wrong. I mean, so let's stick with that happiness for the moment. so many people are just unhappy. I think success is building an amazing team of individuals, and the number one team, the most important team you'll ever have, is your family. And so many people take their families for granted. They're so focused on work or making a buck or owning things that they don't put the time into their family. And I'll tell you, as a guy who laid there facing death, you don't care about any of that shit.
Yeah.
None of it matters. All that matters in that moment when you're facing down the fact that this is it are the people that you love. And if you've lived such a hollow, empty life that you don't have anybody, I'm going to tell you, it will be a very lonely moment when the end comes. So to me, that's where your focus should be. And for me, that's where my focus is. I love my family. I love doing things with my kids. My wife is my best friend. I have a small group of very close friends, and I like to try and do things with them. So that's important to me. Fitness is important to me, and trying to put time into the 5 areas of the Pentagon. I know I feel better, and I manage stress better, and I manage my emotions better, and I manage that little demon better when I'm active and I'm taking care of my body and I'm eating right and I'm getting good at sleep and I get that workout in each day. So those are things that are important to me. Educating myself. I travel a lot, so I try to maintain a schedule, and I know that when I get off my schedule and I'm undisciplined in my life, I start to feel overwhelmed like all of us do. So I know that I operate better and to try and maintain that schedule, which is really hard when, you're in a different city every week and all these
you're
different
always traveling,
things.
Yeah.
So those are the things for me. So success for me is that happiness. And it is a never ending journey, in my opinion.
Yeah, man.
But that's what I'm going after. And having those anchor points for me, it's my family.
I love it. So I wrap up all these interviews with 5 rapid fire questions. But before we get there, how do people find you? Where do they go to connect with you? How can they hire you to speak?
Yeah, you can go to my website, jasonredman.com, and you can find me. You can hire me to speak there. You can get signed copies of the Trident. Overcome is on there, although we're not quite up with the pre-sales yet. That'll come out in December. You can sign up for my coaching or consulting. I have my group coaching, the Overcome Army group, and then I have a higher level executive coaching that you can submit a questionnaire for. And then you can find me on Facebook at Jason Redman, Twitter at Jason Redman WW, and then Instagram, which is what I'm most active on, Jason Redman WW also. And I don't have anybody that manages my Instagram. So if you direct message me, that's me writing you back. And I'm usually pretty good. I normally get back to people that day, if not within 24 hours.
I can tell you this. That's how I reached out to him, and he got back to me really quickly. But you, real quick, and something we didn't dive into was your Overcome Army, which gives people an opportunity that can't necessarily get like a one-on-one access to, but it gives them an opportunity from you. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, how did you form this? Where did this whole idea come from?
Well, and here it's a new program, but we put it together just for exactly what you said. I started looking at different people that were doing high level executive coaching, and it's really expensive. And I'll be honest, I mean, I'm doing pretty well in the public speaking arena, so I garner a pretty good fee. And really in life, you have to start to understand, what is my value? What is my time worth? And I started to realize, one of the things, I was doing some individual coaching at the end of 2018, and I had some people who just didn't, I think they liked the idea of talking to a Navy SEAL, but they really didn't want to put the work in. Yeah. So I said, okay, what can I put together where I try and encourage like-minded individuals who maybe don't have the money to pay for the higher level, but we put them in a new team. And I was like, man, it's an army of people. And I came up with the idea for the Overcome Army. And it is a group coaching format where they join, and $99 a month. That's less than $3 a day, to make a difference in your life. And you get put into a private Facebook group, the Overcome Army Facebook group. And it's with like-minded individuals who all are trying to be successful in their own lives, whether they want to build better structure, discipline, they really want to put time into their physical, they want to be better family members, they want to build their business, whatever it is. Because the disciplines and the things that we need to put in place are the same regardless of those areas, how we goal set, how we understand ourselves. So every week we have a 20-minute class on a different subject related to peak performance. And then we have a 10-minute question and answer. And then I'm monitoring I'm monitoring that private group. So if there are things that are on there, we're putting stuff on there. I recommend books. I recommend things like that to help people be better. And then the group is able to talk to each other and say, hey, look, I'm working on, XYZ. I'm trying to be better in my business. Is there anybody out there that also is doing this? So now we're building a network of individuals who can mentor and help each other.
Awesome. I love all that. So make sure you guys go check that out. I'm a big proponent of groups that you can be a part of that are investing in themselves, because that's how you get to, even if it's something as small as $99 a month, that's how you be of getting to the point level. So definitely check that out. So we're going to get the 5 rapid fire questions. Some are fun, some are serious. I just ask you this, answer within one word or at the most one sentence. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. My wife will tell me he's wordy. All right. One word. That's my goal.
The first one is, if you were ever on death row, what would be your last meal?
McDonald's French fries.
It's a real good choice. What is one characteristic or trait in a friend that's non-negotiable?
Loyalty.
If you could have dinner with anybody living or dead, who would it be?
George Washington.
So what would you ask him?
I would ask him how he managed to maintain the conviction to, so in the winter when he was at Valley Forge was the hardest point of the war for us. And even his own friends were questioning his leadership. And literally, we were at this massive tipping point as a country. Like, we would not have a country if George Washington at Valley Forge had said, you know what, this isn't worth it. I've got, massive amounts of guys deserting, mutiny. My own friends are, questioning my leadership. I could be back home in Valley Forge with Martha, just enjoying myself. Yeah. But he didn't. He stayed the course. So I'd want to know, what was it within him, this fire, this overcome mindset that made him say, I believe enough in this because we were going up against the greatest military force in the world at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about David and Goliath. So what made him believe? Because that is one of the greatest examples of the overcome mindset at work and leadership conviction that I personally have witnessed.
I love that. So at the end of your life, if you could only be remembered for one sentence, what would that say?
He made me better.
So obviously this podcast is called The Growth Now Movement. So I wrap up every single episode with one question, and that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment?
My failure as a leader by far. That colossal failure and to be ostracized from my brotherhood of warriors was the toughest journey I've ever walked. But it also is the greatest journey that built me into who I am today. It enabled me to launch from injury. It has enabled me to continue to drive forward. So many times when I've had hard things go in my life, I'm able to look back on that and other things and say, you know what, you've been through worse. Put one foot in front of the other and let's get off the X and go.
Awesome. Jay, thank you so much, man, for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And of course, thank you again for your service and the time that you've put in and the time that you continue to put in and the service that you're doing. Irreplaceable.
Justin, my honor, man. Thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing, man. We need more motivation and inspiration in this world.
Man, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.